What is up, YouTube? Guys, I am really excited about this build. I'm a big fan of the cast on crit mechanic, and as well as Mathels. I gotta admit, he's got a great build with the necromancer, cast on crit, detonate dead. And that's a lot of what this build was kind of based around. I did play the necromancer, cast on crit, detonate dead, and great damage, absolutely just destroying bosses. Downside is it is very much like a glass cannon. So I thought to myself, how do I get this much damage output, or at least close to it, with something with a lot more survivability? And luckily, I had accidentally crafted into a chest piece that I also wanted to build a character around. And I put 2 and 2 together and made a Jugg cast on crit, detonate dead, putting out an insane amount of DPS. Now, I know whenever I come into a Path of Exile build YouTube video, I just want to get straight into the way it looks. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about the build while you guys watch. We're going into a T16 Crimson Temple at level 90. Bear in mind, I was actually able to kill Sirus at level 87, 86 or 87 with this character. So the sky is up at the moment. At the moment, you're going to see a Cyclone being the primary skill that's going to help proc Detonate Dead. Well, it's proccing both Desecrate as well as Detonate Dead. You can start off by using a spell cascade, which is what I use for most of the build and leveling process and whatnot. I did end up being able to invest in a awakened spell cascade, which just makes a lot more damage because you're producing a lot more explosions, a lot more bodies to consume, and just overall your clear is just getting, as you can see, covering a good chunk of the screen in rip frames. There are variants that can be used, such as Volatile Dead. However, they did add a cap to the number of balls that can be created with Volatile Dead. So in my opinion, Detonate Dead is the superior option at this point, and particularly Val Detonate Dead for when you go into those boss fights. You can go straight in. You're going to see me use it here. I'm going to go ahead and use Ancestral Protector, giving me more attack speed, as well as Val Detonate Dead here. That's those residual explosions you're seeing. And then you're going to see just the clear speed is just phenomenal. Some of the downsides and map mods we can't really run are Reflect Fizz, which you could run Reflect Fizz. A little bit iffy because you're really not doing a lot of Fizz damage, and there are ways to mitigate that by Fizz to fire conversions. Since fire is your primary source of damage, I'm just not going to advise it unless you do your tweaks. Elemental Reflect you can't run, obviously. And preferably, I don't do the temp chains and stuff like that because I'm just not a big fan of moving slowly. They can be done. I just don't like doing them. As you can see, our movement speed isn't the most ranger of movement speed levels. But we are able to clear really quickly. So I think this is within like a 2-minute mark, and I'm just going to choose like the biggest body parts for this Metamorph so you can see our ability to help clear Metamorph bosses fairly quickly, in my opinion. As you can see, boom, he's down. To be fair, I think the mods on that Metamorph weren't the most OP, but we were still able to clear it fairly easily. So now that you guys have seen the way the map actually clears, I'm gonna go ahead and dive a little bit more into the build itself, some of the more mechanics. Like I said, I know whenever I go into a YouTube video of a new build, I want to see how it feels first and how it looks. And that's a perfect example. It was a T16 map, able to clear it super fast, able to kill the boss super fast. So going into this, we're going to show you, go ahead and check out the gear. Like I said, I crafted this chest piece and I was like, you know what? I've got to use it on something. Originally, the Astral Plate incursion mods dropped in a map. I didn't even pick the base up. It dropped in a map, and I was like, you know what? This is a pretty solid Astral Plate. I feel like it would be bad to not craft on it. So I went ahead and got these rolls, and the 2% additional Fizz damage reduction. Strength is all right, but the recover 6% of life on kill is really handy for those dense maps with those spooky mods out there, especially some of those like porcupine maps where as soon as they die, you're at least recovering a lot of your health instantly, which is really nice and satisfying, as well as the armor rating and some life rating. A reason I kept these in my inventory here is because I'm contemplating swapping out. We're going to get an additional 2% Fizz reduction from utilizing these gloves over these gloves. However, these particular gloves allow me to craft damage during flask effect, which is what I went ahead and kept these. They're actually relatively cheap. It's an incursion mod that's giving us the crit chance against shocked enemies. Then the life at attack speed are the primary ones you're kind of wanting. So that way you have the life mod as well as getting your cyclone to hit more often to establish more crit. The next thing is going to be wind shrieks. I was actually kind of toying around with the concept of dual running curses, assassin's mark on hit, as well as flammability to add that increased like elemental penetration. So my initial process was, for regards to the video, I didn't recraft any rings because assassin's mark on hit is a pretty easy to get ring. Generally speaking, you can probably pick one up for about 50 chaos. This is not really a budget friendly build. I'm just gonna go ahead and put that out there. It's not detrimental. It's not super expensive unless you go more into the min max, but most of your cost is going to go into the sword, which we're going to get into a second. But I actually tried to fuse assassin's mark on hit and flammability into one ring, but since they're both in fact the same mod group, you can't do that. I actually ended up rolling these mods, which I'm also not going to just not use, because landing spell damage and life onto a level 12 assassin's mark on hit is pretty, I was pretty lucky. So I went ahead and held onto the ring, put increased fire damage. So going into the most expensive part of the build, the sword itself, I crafted from scratch myself. However, you can pick them up on PoE trade. The price varies depending on what the current meta is at the moment. Cast on crit and attack speed are probably going to be your most important roles, I would say, on this. I was lucky enough to land gain a frenzy charge on kill, as well as some other mod I actually lucked out and annulled, and then slammed into attack speed. Like I said, it was just the most lucky ever crafting experience. And then went ahead and crafted some spell damage with percent chance to deal double damage while focused. Now bear in mind, those of you guys that aren't familiar with the focus mechanic, just as long as you have that any kind of focused ability or anything, we're mentioning focus on any of your gear, you'll automatically have, I guess it's behind me, the ability to focus becomes available. So the fact that it's on the sword gives you a button to push, which makes you focus. I'm just gonna go ahead and put that. I know I was trying to figure that out for a while. I was like, how do you get focus in order to proc the sword? As soon as it's on the sword, you automatically get it. And then as far as helmet enchantments, Detonate Dead has 45% increased chance to detonate an additional corpse, is the Uberlab roll we wanted. And then you can actually craft the life and minus fire res via fossil crafting. It's actually not terribly hard to do. I did the same thing with a cold build that I did as far as that. And at the moment, until I can actually get flammability on, I guess, on my other ring now, I'm actually running it in presence, which gives flammability reduced mana reserve. It's actually not a bad amulet anyway, because you're adding fire damage, you get life, you get another more elements of regenerate, which is what our build is kind of focused around. And then of course flammability with 100% reduced mana reserve. And we're going to go into our auras at the moment. We're running Herald of Ash, Skitterbots, which I'm going to get into in a second, flammability, which is free, and then a level 20 precision. Now at the moment, even at level 1, our hit chance is actually at 100% because of our Jugg Ascendancy node. That just skyrockets our accuracy. However, I went ahead and went with a level 20 precision just for the more crit chance. It helps out a lot. If you can get more crit elsewhere, by all means, fine. You can finagle that. You can even throw like a war banner in there or something to give you like adrenaline, or I forget what the war banners give you off the top of my head. Silver Swallow Urn, since we are consuming corpses, it does help proc with the increased crit chance during a flask effect. I believe the flask itself is relatively on the cheaper side now. I noticed mid league is around like 80 chaos, but it fluctuates so often. This one, luckily, I got it while killing the syndicate boss. That was actually just a really lucky drop. Went Wise Oak over at series because Wise Oak actually gives us more damage. I just got better DPS out of POB from Wise Oak by like 20 or 30,000. So it was like, okay, it's really hard to justify the other one, especially because we're getting a decent amount of leech, and of course your diamond flask. Like I said, I put these gloves in here for the extra 2% fizz damage mitigation. Let's go ahead and just dive straight into POB a little bit. Our Detonate Dead right now, we're hitting 239,000 per hit. And you got to think how many detonating corpses are going on right now. So that's a lot. Usually at like, I would say about 150,000, you're good. You're able to clear pretty much all the way. I was clearing T16s at about 140,000 per hit. So, you know, this is a huge amount. I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head. I want to say it was like 17 or 18 explosions per cast. And since you're cast on crit and you're doing a lot of those at one time, paired with if you go ahead and trigger your Val Detonate Dead, that's just a substantial amount of damage, as well as the corpse itself explosion, and whatnot. So at the moment, we go ahead and take things like Art of the Gladiator to help with our movement speed a little bit. As you can see, we were chugging around a little bit. Our fizz damage reduction right now is at 71%. I am contemplating some ideas to increase that to our cap at 90%. But so far, I've been able to clear most of the content I want to clear. End game stuff, like I said, I've killed Sirius, all the Guardians, stuff like that. At the 71% so far. Jug wise, we're taking Unbreakable, Unflinching, Unyielding, and Undeniable. Undeniable is what's given that insane amount of accuracy rating and whatnot for our hit chance for the Cyclone itself. And then going into our regen, we're regenerating 563 life, which is pretty solid, especially if you do happen to get into one of those boss fights that doesn't kill him within like 1 or 2 seconds because of the sheer amount of damage you're putting out. You can go ahead and just leap slam out of there for just a little bit, and then your life will regen really fast without having to waste life flasks if you don't have any more. So at the moment, this is where we're at with it. I'm starting to path into some more jewel sockets. As we can see, we got one here, we got one here, we got one here, we got one here. So like, I still have a lot more damage I'm going to be compiling onto it. At the moment, I'm running jewels that have crit multiplier with fire skills and crit multiplier with elemental skills. The reason why I chose those instead of global multiplier is because you actually get more from that. I think the global crit chance multiplier, I think, caps to like 8% or like 10% or something, whereas fire skills, elemental skills, I think they cap at like 18% or something. So if you want those two mods, I mean, granted, if you get a third mod that says global, by all means, that's even more damage, but this one's fairly easy to find. You'll see things with your third modifier as in this case I put melee crit chance, so that way I'm proccing it more often. One of my other jewels has just more increased area damage, as you can see here. So those are the two key mods you want on your jewels, and you want to just, for your third mod, something that just benefits you in some way, via attack speed, maybe global, maybe area damage, something along those lines. And then one of the reasons why we run skitter bots over zealotry, and that's one of the big changes I had to make, because zealotry is a huge amount of damage. However, skitter bots shocks the enemy. So whenever an enemy is shocked, they are taking a substantial amount of more damage. So when I POB'd zealotry on here, I was getting a good amount of damage. But when I POB'd skitterbots and was able to shock, then the sheer amount of increased damage was, I think I gained like 70,000 more or something insane. So skitterbots is a little bit more superior to that, when it actually frees up a little bit more of your mana to be able to reserve things like a level 20 precision and whatnot, because zealotry is 50% reserve, skitterbots is 35, and you have a little bit more wiggle room to kind of play with where you need it. I run Ancestral Protector on a 6-link because really the original version of this build runs Comb's Heart, which I would recommend if you are wanting to go this build route, and if you don't have an Astral Plate that's just got these good mods, I would actually absolutely recommend Comb's Heart. It's very, very cheap this league. I think I picked it up for like 30 chaos or something. Maybe it might have gone up to like 50 by now. Comb's Heart gives you a lot of life. It gives you a decent amount of fizz reduction due to the amount of armor, as well as it gives you 40% increased fire damage if you get a perfect rolled one. So by all means, it's fine. You actually put your Ancestral Protector just in a 4-link somewhere if you want. Like I said, I had the extra link, so I went ahead and 6-linked it with Culling Strike, of course. And then I put Blind on there to help blind the enemies, gives us a little bit more defense, and then some damage scaling for Ancestral Protector. So that's going to give you more attack speed, which means the more times you hit, the more times you crit, the more times you cast Detonate Dead. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy the build. I know this is one of the funnest builds I've made. I've made several different builds this league, just toying around with what I like to do. And what that is I like to kill bosses. I like to clear maps really fast. I don't like to change between builds in order to do both. So this satisfies that needs. It gives me the survivability versus the necro variant. I will say the necro variant, when it comes to min-maxing, does push out a lot more DPS. However, the survivability on it is sort of like a glass cannon. However, whereas you have a Jugg who puts out pretty close to that amount of DPS, which is a substantial amount. And then having the survivability as well, especially when you go into bosses that can't be one shot due to the phasing mechanics. Maybe they have different stages where they need to, you hit them and they go to the next stage, you hit them and they go to the next stage. We have to dodge mechanics and whatnot. Being able to survive those mechanics is to me is a big deal, because I like to boss. I like to fight Sirus, I like to fight the Guardians, Elder, whatnot. This really helps facilitate that, so I would highly recommend it. I'll have the POB for it down in the link below. Like I said, I've just been kind of going with it as I level the character, so it's at level 90 at the moment. If you want to push it to level 100, I would say path more into, like I said, those jewel sockets will cover deep into the 90s. If not, it might push it to like 98, 100. I haven't done the math on it. Jewel sockets, I mean, 30 to 40% multiplier is huge gains. And then, like I said, if we do craft another ring that puts flammability on hit, honestly, we could even do Assassin's Mark on hit as well as Elemental hit on the same ring. Flammability on hit just gives more damage due to the increased percent that you're able to get. We can actually then swap out our amulet for a rare amulet with just a substantial amount more DPS. Like I said, there's all kinds of options that we could run. So appreciate you guys for tuning in. Make sure you guys follow me on social media. Make sure you guys hit that sub button down below. I appreciate y'all for viewing and taking the time to take a look at my build. I'll see you guys again very soon.